everything we discuss is then leaked to the paper, that's not appropriate.
而且我们也不是那样进行的。
And that's not how the way the conversation was
如果
conducted.
有诚心，咱们就用一个互相尊重的态度。
Mr. Dress Up got dressed down. This week at the G20 summit, China's Xi Jinping took issue and scolded Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for leaks to the media about China's interference in our elections. Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Brian Lilley and Jamil Jivani. Okay, Jamil, people can see it for themselves. Some commentators are talking about this dressing down at the G20 by Xi Jinping's China to Justin Trudeau, that Trudeau could barely walk away after the fact. That they can look for themselves. I'll reserve judgment. But in his attempt, which I would think is an anemic attempt to respond to Xi Jinping, Justin Trudeau didn't acknowledge the real issue, and that is China is interfering in our elections, in our economy, in our national security. So Trudeau's government has done little to address these issues.
Yeah. And Chinese state media has come out and said that this is about their concerns that Prime Minister Trudeau's office leaked details of their conversation to Canadian media. And, there's a part of me when I first saw this video and first saw people talking about it where I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is a good thing. We're finally getting a bit contentious with the Chinese Communist Party. Maybe Trudeau's showing a spine. It was quite shocking. And then you look into it, as you said, Adrienne, and you realize that this is an attempt by the Trudeau government to make themselves seem like they're standing up for Canada and the integrity of our elections. But really they sat on the details about Chinese interference into our 2019 election for 10 months and didn't do anything until they got pressured by the media and some journalists into doing it. There's a great point made by Terry Glavin at the National Post about how this is another example of Trudeau virtue signaling, that instead of dealing with the substance of the interference, he just wants to seem tough and try to look like this interaction with President Xi Jinping was an example of him standing up for Canada when it seems like anything but.
Brian, you would have thought that even Trudeau throwing all of his accolades all those years ago at that his basic admiration was for the Chinese government, that it would have saved him from this scolding, shall we say. But, people are going to call us agents of the Chinese government because we're going after Justin Trudeau. Look, we know what China is capable of. We know what their interference has been. The issue we have is that our prime minister has had security briefing after security briefing that 11 individuals in Canada, election officials, staffers, have been paid by the Chinese Communist Party for election interference. In fact, Michael Chong, the Conservative member of Parliament, asked about it in the House recently. Just take a look.
We find out that the Prime Minister was told 10 months ago in January about hundreds of thousands of dollars that were illegally funneled to at least 11 election candidates. My question is simple. Who are these 11 election candidates?
Brian, you've written extensively about this. Who are these people? Do we know anything?
No, we don't, and we don't know the name of the Ontario MPP, according to reports, who aided and abetted the Chinese consulate here in Toronto to carry out this plan. So we've got 11 candidates who had allegedly received help from the Chinese government through a plan hatched by the Chinese consulate in Toronto. All we know is it was a mix of Liberals and Conservatives, and that an Ontario MPP allegedly helped. Well, I reached out to Doug Ford's office and said, who is this? Do you know anything? And they said they have never even been briefed by anybody at the federal level, whether it be CSIS or the Trudeau government. So they don't know anything about this other than what they've read in the media reports. Unfortunately, they also wouldn't answer my questions on whether we needed more investigation. And the obvious answer is yes. But the only people calling for more investigations into this are Michael Chong and Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre. They've asked for a committee, a Commons committee, to look into this. They could end up with egg on their face from this. They could be embarrassed. Maybe it's 7 Conservatives and 4 Liberals. Could be the other way around. We don't know. Neither do they, but at least they're asking for more information to come out on this. We've had this. We've had the claims of the Chinese police stations being set up in Canada. And I wrote about that in a recent column. All these examples of Chinese interference, and Jamil already mentioned the great Terry Glavin column. Read it. Terry describes it as Trudeau getting his ears boxed by the object of his unrequited love. Trudeau is not waking up to what China really is. We're getting some words from his ministers to that effect, but his actions still show that he just admires the basic dictatorship. He says he needs to engage with China so that he can move them along on climate change. They don't care about climate change, and they definitely don't care about hearing about it from Canada.
Okay, Jamil, we constantly hear, we heard it all throughout the course of the midterms, democracy's on the ballot in the United States. If you don't vote basically for the Democrats, democracy is going to go sideways. But for the entire duration of Donald Trump's presidency, we heard about Russian information, Russian disinformation. They stopped the Hunter Biden investigation, or the dossier on Hunter Biden and the laptop, because the FBI claimed that it was going to be Russian disinformation. But we hear that from the United States. We don't hear that type of language in Canada, where it has now been demonstrably proven and in information given to our federal government and law enforcement agencies and security agencies that China is trying to interfere in our democracy. Why? What is the adversity here? Why won't we have an investigation, have more information? We need some light shed upon this, do we not?
Well, you're absolutely right. Compared to the United States, it seems like this is a lot less interesting of an issue to Canadian leaders. I think partly that may be because the Liberal Party won the 2019 election, and maybe it's not in their interest to dig into how that played out. We know, based on the Chinese Communist Party's past comments, that they would prefer the Liberal Party to be in power over the Conservative Party of Canada. They've said this themselves. They've denounced conservatives themselves. So perhaps Liberals just don't see it in their own interest to dig into this, and they don't want more people talking about it. But the responsibility also falls on the Conservative Party. And I hope we see Pierre Poilievre make a bigger issue out of this and really help Canadians understand why this is so important and why it should be an issue top of mind.
Mm-hmm. Brian, I'm going to give you the last word. We have hearings going on Parliament Hill about the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act. Justin Trudeau's Liberals went after Canadians, then seized their bank accounts for doing their democratic right of protesting. Mm-hmm. They took harder action against Canadians than they are against a foreign power trying to meddle in our elections. Last word.
It is embarrassing, and if this report is false, it's up to the government to say so. But Justin Trudeau's been asked about it several times. He's never said it's false. He made an international incident about it with President Xi at the G20 summit. So they're not refuting it. They need to tell us more information, and they need to take action. I want to know who the candidates were. I want to know who was behind this. If they're Canadian citizens or permanent residents, charge them. If they're foreign nationals from China, diplomats, expel them. But there needs to be action.
And we can't forget about all of those interferences that we've also had with our labs across the country as well. Log on to Facebook and Twitter. Let us know what you think, and go to thetorontosun.com and hit that subscribe button for more information on this story and coverage you will not find anywhere else.